New York, June 15th, 1904, a sunny Wednesday morning. A church steamer eases off the Manhattan Pier, hats waving, lemonade packed, the brass band playing. Then the air tastes wrong. Smoke slips from under a door, meets a hard river wind, and turns mean. Parents strap on life vests that look solid and watch, horrified, as they drag children under. By the time the hull kissed land, the East River was full of people and silence. New York's deadliest day before 9/11, and, for a long time, the day the city tried not to remember. This is the story of the General Slocum, how a church picnic became a catastrophe, how a city changed its rules, and how memory, like the tide, sometimes runs out unless we push it back in. The General Slocum was built in 1891, a side-wheel excursion steamer designed for day trips. Think floating park, open decks, snack counters, a dance floor under a canopy, white paint that made her look clean even when the paint hid cracks. She was named for a Civil War general because in the 1890s you named things for generals the way we name things for celebrities now. Automatic prestige. New York at the time was exploding with people. Tenements in the Lower East Side stuffed with German immigrants, their shops and beer halls and churches in a neighbourhood some called Kleindeutschland, Little Germany. On an ordinary day you could step out of St. Mark's Evangelical Lutheran Church on East 6th Street and hear a different city. Lilting German, the smell of rye bread, the clink of steins, the thrum of a brass band. The church's annual highlight was the summer outing, a boat ride up the East River to a picnic ground called Locust Grove on Long Island Sound. For the kids it meant blue water and open sky. For the mothers, a day to breathe fresh air. For everyone, the promise of safety. After all, what could happen surrounded by neighbours and watched over by God? New York's waters were busy highways, ferries, tugs, barges and day steamers weaving like carriages in a parade. The Slocum was run by Knickerbocker Steamboat Company, a business with a simple model. Pack them in, sell the day, collect your fee. The company knew summer crowds, it also knew the math of maintenance. If a safety check became a handshake, who would know? Meanwhile, the congregation at St. Mark's prepared. Mothers ironed dresses, boys polished shoes. The pastor's wife tucked a list of parishioners into her handbag, just in case they needed to gather later. She couldn't know how much that list would matter. And through all this, the Slocum rested at her pier. White paint, red trim, that big paddle wheel on her side like a clock face that only turned forward. Here's where we zoom in, not to the day of the disaster yet, but to the quiet choices that made it possible. First, inspections. On paper, she looked ready. Enough life vests to cover every man, woman and child. The ship got her certificate. The inspector collected his fee. The company kept its schedule. Second, the life vests. They were filled with cork. At least, they were supposed to be. Over time, cork breaks down. To the hand, it still feels heavy. But in water, it's dead weight. Third, the lifeboats. They sat in their cradles under fresh paint. Paint protects wood, true, but too much paint is like glue. Add rope that's not been loosened in years, and when you need to drop a boat, you're fighting a sculpture of your own neglect. The crew. Did they run full fire drills? Did they know the layout blindfolded? Could they work the new hires into a practice machine? Or did the captain, William Van Schack, old school and confident, think he'd never need that kind of training because the Slocum only did picnics, and the East River was always nearby and he could beach her if something went wrong? These are the decisions made in offices, in laziness, in cost-cutting, in habit, that line up like dominoes. June 15th, 1904. Morning. St. Mark's families file down to the pier at East 3rd Street. Tickets are punched. The brass band strikes a cheerful march. The Slocum eases off, her paddle wheel licking the water. People fan themselves with paper programs. The church's pastor smiles and checks his head count. The destination is Locust Grove, up the Sound. It's going to be a good day. Down in a forward storage room, called the lamp room or a locker, There are straw, oily rags, maybe some paint, maybe extra life preservers, straw and oil, that's kindling and fuel. A small crewman, perhaps looking for something, lights a match for a better look, or maybe a carelessly tossed cigarette. Accounts differ. What we know is this: fire appears where it should not be. At first it's nothing dramatic, a wisp, a flicker. The Slocum has fire buckets, hoses, extinguishers. A deckhand sees smoke and tries to stomp it out. Someone throws water from a bucket. The door is opened, bad move. Oxygen rushes in, the flames exhale like an animal waking up. Now the fire finds the straw and the oil. The room turns orange. A call goes up. The band halts mid-phrase. A steward runs for a hose. He turns the valve. The hose belches dust. The pump doesn't pump, or the canvas has rotted, or both. Another tries to pull a second hose. It splits like old paper. Fire spreads along paint like it's a candle wick. There's shouting across the deck, first in English, then in German. "Fire!" The captain is told. There's a fire forward. He looks ahead. Smoke curls low, then lifts. The breeze pushes it straight back through the boat, right where the families are standing. His choice is narrow instantly: stop and try to fight, or push to the nearest landing, or beach the ship on the closest shore. But habits run deep. The Slocum's routine is to keep moving. He orders full steam ahead. The Slocum surges forward. That simple decision, speed into the wind, turns smoke into a blowtorch. Flames rush aft, drawn like a ribbon. Decks become griddles underfoot. Painted wood pops and blisters. Canvas awnings ignite and drip fire like wax. The band drops instruments and runs. Passengers lurch for the life preservers lined along the deck in neat rows. They yank at them. The fabric tears like fragile paper. Inside, cork dust. Mothers tie vests on children. The vests feel heavy enough, then lift them toward the rail. Another crewman runs to a lifeboat. The davit crank turns, but the boat doesn't swing. Paint has glued the lines to the sockets. Someone grabs a hatchet and hacks at the ropes. The blade skids off hardened fibres. Another lifeboat. Same story. Stuck. The ship carries lifeboats that might as well be statues. People surge to the port side to escape the fire rushing from starboard. The Slocum lists. Children cry. A mother prays and tries not to inhale. The captain, from the wheelhouse, aims for North Brother Island, an under a mile patch of land ahead with a hospital. It's not the absolute closest point to shore. There's land closer to starboard. But he knows North Brother. It's open and he trusts he can beach there. Seconds count. Every second moving pushes the fire back harder. A nurse on North Brother Island, hearing frantic whistles, looks up to see a white steamer wreathed in smoke. She yells to order stretchers. On the riverbank, men and women begin to wave and run. On deck, the first jumpers hit the water. It looks like salvation, coolness, distance from flame. But the East River is cruel. The current tugs. Many passengers can't swim. Swimming wasn't common then, especially among city dwellers. And those life vests, the cork dust inside makes them heavier than water. Tied to a child, they become anchors. Some vests even have chunks of iron hardware sewn inside, meant to keep shape, now turned lethal. A father jumps holding a toddler. They vanish under the churn. A teenager grabs a bench plank. The plank slips away. The river becomes a second fire. Captain Van Schaik, eyes stinging, holds the wheel. He aims and runs her aground hard onto the shore of North Brother Island, the bow biting into shallows. The forward part burns like a kiln. Some passengers now can wade, stumble, crawl ashore. Nurses rush ankle deep into the water to grab hands. A doctor rips his coat into strips and binds charred skin. Men in rowboats push off from nearby to haul survivors from the current. The air is a storm of ash. Inside the boat, the pastor calls for calm, his voice breaking. The deck under his feet groans. He turns to find parishioners he baptized as infants, now teenagers with singed hair, clutching one another. He urges them toward the rail. Smoke answers. The Slocum's paddle wheels keep turning for a few beats, then stop. The fire roars up through the superstructure. Windows blow out. On the far bank, a tugboat captain shouts to his crew to throw lines and pull people out. Another steamer cuts its own schedule, feverishly reversing to come alongside. Across the harbour, bells ring. Reporters sprint. Within minutes, the General Slocum is a burned hive. She lists, the upper decks collapsing into the lower. A child pinned under a railing is freed by a stranger who burns his hands to the bone. A mother who thought she'd tied salvation to her daughter watches that small head disappear below brown-green waves. The smell, a mix of pine tar, cotton, hair, sticks in the throat. By the time the last survivors stumble ashore, the numbers are already staggering. It'll take days to count because families travel together. Some were rescued, others drifted downriver and were pulled from pilings miles away. But the scale is evident. More than 1,000 lives lost. 2 minutes of small decisions, then 20 minutes of fire. And that's it. New York's deadliest day before September 11, 2001. In the afternoon, grief spills into the streets of Kleindeutschland. Tenements hang black crepe from windows. Beer hall songs turn to mourning hymns. The city sets up a makeshift morgue at a riverside pier. Mothers, fathers, siblings walk a simple, brutal circuit. Sheet to sheet, tag to tag. Identification can be a shoe, a locket, a braid of hair. The pastor walks among his flock, suddenly a shepherd with no sheep. Newspapers blast huge headlines. Horror on the East River. Over 1,000 dead. Reporters swarm the hospital on North Brother Island, stuffing notepads with names and scenes. The country stops to stare. A church picnic, this is supposed to be the safest kind of day. The fact that it wasn't feels like betrayal. Then, as the smoke clears, the question swings into focus. How did this happen? Investigations begin. City, federal, company. Every piece is examined, and the puzzle assembles into a picture of negligence so obvious it reads like a parody. The life vests? Many crumble to dust at a touch. They hadn't been replaced in years. Some were reportedly weighted with metal to feel substantial. The lifeboats, fused by paint and rope, never swung out in drills. The fire hoses? Rotten. The crew? Largely untrained, for fire anyway. The inspector? He'd signed off after what looked like a sham inspection. He'd be charged later. Captain Van Schaik, who did beach the Slocum eventually, faces outrage. Why did he keep moving when he first noticed the fire? Why not steer at once for the closest shore? Why not order people to the stern away from the forward flames? He will defend himself, saying he thought North Brother Island offered the best chance to ground safely, and that he acted in the moment as best he could. But in court, nuance burns away. He'll be convicted of criminal negligence and serve years in prison before being pardoned. The Knickerbocker Steamboat Company points fingers downward, at the crew, at the inspector. The public points upward at the company that profited, while deferring the cost of safety. Lawsuits pile up. In some, payouts are pitiful, capped by outdated maritime laws that imagine a vessel's value after a disaster is close to zero. Therefore, the victims get almost nothing. It's a legal trick. If the ship is declared nearly worthless, liability shrinks. In German New York, the loss is more than numbers. Whole families are gone. Classrooms at St. Mark's empty out. Brides-to-be vanish with their bridesmaids. Grandmothers disappear with 3 generations in their arms. Men who sold bread or stitched jackets now sit in doorways, stunned. The neighbourhood never fully recovers. Over the next few years, Kleindeutschland dissolves. Survivors move uptown or to other boroughs. The community fabric, songs, jokes, festivals, frays. It's not just that people died, it's that the living can't stand to stay where every stoop holds a ghost. Meanwhile, reforms arrive with the anger. Inspectors lose their jobs and some are prosecuted. Life preservers get stricter standards. Real cork, properly inspected, replaced on schedules that aren't optional. Lifeboats must be swung out in drills, not just counted. Fire drills become mandatory. Crew training moves from "we'll figure it out" to "show me." And there's a shift in mindset the public can feel. Boats aren't floating parlours, they're machines that can kill you if you treat them like parlours. But here's the twist. You heard it in the hook. As years pass, the memory of the General Slocum fades in the wider city. Not among the families, not among the nurses who grabbed small hands in the water, but in the broad mind of New York. Why? Partly because the victims were poor immigrants, people with less political power. Partly because the city is a machine for forgetting. It must forget a little to keep moving. And partly because the next decades bring more noise. Headlines, wars, new disasters. The Slocum becomes a quiet fact, a topic for old men on stoops and yellowed clippings in a church drawer. Still, traces remain. At St. Mark's Church, by then sold to a different congregation, a plaque. At North Brother Island, a place later known for a quarantine hospital where Typhoid Mary was confined, there's a shoreline where, if the tide is low, you can squint and almost see a white hull driving itself into the mud. In a few museums, a life vest sits behind glass, harmless now, mute about the weight it once offered to small chests. On the East River, commuter ferries march where the Slocum burned, their crews drilled, their lifeboats greased, their hoses pressurized, because of this day. We started with a picnic and ended with a city trying to forget. Let's loop back to the small choices because that's the part that hides in plain sight. A cheap life vest is invisible until you need it. A painted over lifeboat looks lovely until you ask it to move. A drill that's a joke still earns a signature. A captain's habit, keep her moving, feels wise until the wind turns your ship into a bellows. No single person woke up intending to kill 1,000 neighbours. But systems have momentum, and habit plus negligence is a kind of engine. Want to see how one decision multiplies? Picture this. If the first crewman had been trained to shut the door and smother the fire instead of opening the room to air, the blaze might have been a smoky scare, a story over dinner. If the hoses had held pressure, if they'd been tested, maybe the forward deck gets soaked in time. If the lifeboats had swung out instantly, children could have been lowered before the worst of the smoke. If the life vests had floated, the river would have saved the people who jumped, not dragged them under. If the captain had beached the Slocum on the nearest mudflat within a minute rather than pushing forward, 100, 200, who knows, might have walked ashore on splinters and shock, but alive. Each if is a hinge that failed long before June 15th. The General Slocum story bent safety laws, yes, but it also bent memory. For a long time, New York didn't build a big monument. You could walk past the river and never know. Even now, mention New York's deadliest day before 9/11, and many people will say the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, or stare blankly. The Triangle Fire, 246 dead, changed workplace laws and stuck in the public memory, partly because it lined up with labour activism and union demands. The Slocum wasn't about factories or strikes, it was about Sunday clothes on a boat, something that feels personal and random. Personal and random stories are the hardest to keep in headlines. But when you look closer, it's not random at all. It's structural. It's about how institutions treat routine safety like a cost centre, until a catastrophe makes the bill public. It's about how paperwork can be a performance. It's about the dignity of small safeguards that no one applauds, unglamorous training, boring inspections, a captain being willing to look wrong for 30 seconds in order to be right forever. Here's a smaller loop. Earlier, we mentioned a list tucked into a handbag. After the fire, lists mattered. Who came back, who didn't. Churchwomen used those lists to track survivors, to arrange funerals, to notice who had no family left and needed food. Memory is built on lists, on names said aloud, on refusing to let the dead be summarized by numbers. And a loop on the river itself. The East River looks like a calm ribbon most days, but it's really a tidal machine. The current that pulled at parishioners in 1904 still pulls at commuters today. It just does it beneath stricter rules, stronger gear, and crews who practice the worst day again and again so they can make it a boring one. If you visit the site, hard to do because North Brother Island is off limits to most of us, You won't find a big statue. You'll find water moving like it always does, a horizon of workboats, the sound of city life. That's part of the lesson. Catastrophes get absorbed into the everyday. The way we honour them is to let the everyday be changed by what they taught. Because New York's deadliest day before 9/11 wasn't a freak accident, it was a mirror. It showed a city what it was willing to tolerate. And it leaves us with a plain challenge, the kind that fits on a small plaque or a big conscience. Do the unglamorous work before you need it. Test the hose, cut the rope free, lift the lifeboat and let it swing. And if you ever find yourself near the East River on a bright morning and you hear a boat whistle, remember, for a few minutes in 1904 that sound meant joy, and then it meant fear, and then it meant nothing at all. Let it mean something again. Let it mean we remember.